Hey everyone. Thanks for clicking. My name is Zachary, I'm 35 years old, and I once gifted my parents a $425,000 seaside mansion for their 50th wedding anniversary, only to arrive and find my sister and her husband had taken it over, throwing my father out. Before I tell you how a single manila folder changed everything in a matter of minutes, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. It's a day that plays over and over in my head like a movie I can't turn off. The sky was that brilliant, painful blue you only get by the coast. The salt was sharp in the air, a smell I'd always associated with peace, with freedom. That smell was the reason I'd bought the house in the first place. A small, blue house with a white porch, framed by two palm trees that leaned into each other like an old married couple. It was meant to be a sanctuary for my parents, Arthur and Eleanor. A final reward for a lifetime of hard work. But as I pulled into the crushed shell driveway, the scene on that white porch was anything but peaceful. My mother, Eleanor, was crumpled in one of the new wicker chairs I'd picked out. Her shoulders were shaking, and even from the car, I could hear the thin, ragged sound of her sobs. My father, Arthur, a man who had faced down factory foremen and financial hardship without ever flinching, stood trembling. His face was pale, his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides, completely helpless. Towering over him was Derek, my sister Chloe's husband. His face was red, a vein pulsing in his thick neck. He jabbed a finger toward the front door, then toward the street. His voice boomed across the manicured lawn, a brutal sound that didn't belong in this quiet neighborhood. "This is my house. Get out!" he roared at my father. And then I saw her, my sister, Chloe. She was leaning against the doorframe, a smirk playing on her lips. She let out a little laugh, a sound like ice cubes rattling in an empty glass. "Oh, Dad, calm down," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "We're just getting settled in. You should be happy for us." My blood ran cold. Settled in? Happy? I killed the engine. The sudden silence was heavy. I got out of the car, the crunch of my shoes on the shells sounding like gunshots in the tense air. I started walking toward the porch. Derek was still yelling. My mother was still crying. My father was still frozen. Chloe was still smiling that venomous smile. None of them saw me at first, not until I reached the bottom step of the porch. Then Chloe's eyes met mine. The smirk vanished. Her face went slack with shock. The laughter died in her throat. She pushed herself off the doorframe, suddenly standing ramrod straight. Derek, sensing the shift, turned his head. His mouth snapped shut mid-rant. A wave of absolute silence fell over the porch. My mother looked up, her tear-streaked face a mixture of relief and terror. My father just stared, his eyes wide. In that moment, they didn't see the son, the brother they thought they knew. They saw something else, someone else. And they were right. The man who had driven 5 hours to get here was not the same man who had left. To understand how we got to that broken moment on the porch of a house meant for love, we have to go back. We have to go back to a lifetime of me giving and them taking. Growing up, our family wasn't poor, but we were always teetering on the edge. My father worked at a local plant, long hours that etched permanent lines of exhaustion around his eyes. My mother stretched every dollar until it screamed. They were good, hard-working people who deserved a break they never got. I was the older child, the quiet one, the observer. I learned early on that my role was to be the shock absorber, the one who patched the holes in the family boat so we could all stay afloat. My sister, Chloe, 2 years younger, learned a different lesson. She was the artist, the free spirit. In our family, that was code for the one who isn't expected to be responsible. While I was bagging groceries at 16 to help with the bills, she was using her allowance on new paints and canvases for a hobby she'd abandon a month later. When I saved up for my first car, a beat-up Toyota, a significant chunk of that money was borrowed to pay for Chloe's class trip to Washington, D.C. I never saw that money again. It was the first of many silent transactions where my future was deferred for her present. "She's just finding herself, Zachary," my mother would say, a pleading look in her eyes. "Be patient with her. My dad would just sigh and retreat into the garage. He avoided conflict, especially with my mother when it came to Chloe. So, I became the family's unofficial credit card, the one they swiped without ever checking the balance. Textbooks in college she couldn't afford? I took on an extra shift at the library. The security deposit for her first apartment with her then-boyfriend, Derek? I emptied my savings account, the one I had earmarked for a down payment on a small condo. I remember my best friend from college, Leo, looking at me across a table at a cheap diner. I was explaining why I had to cancel our post-graduation trip. She needed help with her student loan payment, I said, stirring my coffee. Leo put his mug down with a thud. Zach, he said, his voice serious. You're not her brother. You're her emergency fund. There's a difference. One day, you're going to have nothing left for yourself. I brushed it off. It's what family does, I said, but his words stuck with me, a splinter under the skin. The pattern only got worse after she married Derek. He was a guy full of big ideas and zero follow-through. They were always in some kind of transitional phase, which meant they were always broke. I paid for my niece's braces. I co-signed the lease on their minivan after their old car was repossessed. My parents helped too, in their own way, dipping into their meager retirement savings to cover Chloe's utility bills or invest in one of Derek's doomed business schemes. I got a good job out of college, software architecture. Paid well. I worked hard, climbed the ladder, got a promotion, then another. My salary grew, but my personal savings didn't, not at the rate they should have. Because every time I got ahead, there was a new crisis, a new emergency, a new tearful phone call from Chloe, with my mother on the other end of the line an hour later, gently suggesting I should help. The message was always the same. You are the strong one. You can handle it. They didn't see that the strong one was getting tired. Tired of being the solution to problems I didn't create. Tired of my successes being treated not as achievements to be celebrated, but as a deeper resource to be tapped. Leo was right. I wasn't a son or a brother. I was a safety net. And I was beginning to realize that a safety net is only valued when someone is falling. The turning point came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I was on a conference call, a big project, high stakes. My phone buzzed. It was my dad. He never called me during work hours. My heart hammered against my ribs. I excused myself and took the call. Zachary? Your mother. She fell. She's okay, just a sprained wrist. But the steps. The wooden steps on the porch are rotted through. I should have fixed them months ago. His voice was thick with self-blame. With the property taxes going up, I've been putting it off. He was trying to sound stoic, but I could hear the tremor in his voice. It was the sound of a proud man feeling the weight of his age and his empty pockets. That was it. That was the moment the idea sparked. Not just to fix the steps, but to get them out of that house, that town, that life of constant worry. For the next 6 months, I became a man with a secret mission. I worked like a dog, taking on every side project my firm offered. I saved every single penny. I stopped going out. I ate cheap. My life became a spreadsheet, and every cell was a step closer to getting my parents their sanctuary. I knew I couldn't just hand them a house. Derek and Chloe would see it as a new asset to exploit. I needed to build a fortress, not just a home. That's when I called a lawyer, a man named Mr. Harrison who specialized in estate planning. I found him through a colleague. He was known for being sharp and discreet. We met in his quiet, wood-paneled office. I laid out the whole situation. The years of financial drain, my sister's sense of entitlement, my parents' inability to say no. I didn't want pity. I wanted a strategy. I see this more often than you'd think, Mr. Harrison said, peering at me over his glasses. The golden child and the responsible one. It's a classic, unfortunate dynamic. A simple gift is out of the question. They would have your sister living there within a month, and your parents would be relegated to the guest room. So what do? I asked, my voice tight. I want them to have peace. I don't want this to be another burden. Another thing for the family to fight over. He leaned forward. We create an irrevocable trust, he explained. The trust will own the house. Your parents will be named the lifetime beneficiaries. That means they have the absolute right to live there, undisturbed, for the rest of their lives. No one can kick them out. But, he paused, holding my gaze, the trustee, the person who manages the asset, who makes all the decisions, that will be you. And only you. They can't sell it, they can't mortgage it, they can't even let someone else move in without your express written consent. It's a legal fortress. A wave of relief washed over me. Fortress. That's exactly what it was. It wasn't about control. It was about protection. It wasn't an early inheritance to be squabbled over. It was a lifetime of security. I spent months searching online, then weekends driving up and down the coast. Finally, I found it. The small, blue house with the white porch. It was perfect. Not a mansion in the modern sense, but a mansion of peace. It cost $425,000. Took nearly everything I had. I set up the utilities, paid the property taxes 20 years in advance, and even paid the first few years of the HOA fees. The deed was in the name of the Arthur and Eleanor Family Trust. My name was listed only once, but in the most important place, trustee. I was finally ready. I was about to give my parents the one thing they'd never had, a life without worry. I had no idea I was also about to start a war. The day I showed them the house was one of the best of my life. I told them we were just going for a drive up the coast, a little pre-anniversary celebration. My mom was excited, chattering about the little seaside towns. My dad was quiet, just watching the scenery, a small smile on his face. I turned onto the street, a quiet lane lined with palm trees. "Why are we stopping here?" my mom asked as I pulled into the driveway of the blue house. "Just want to check something out," I said, my heart pounding. We got out of the car. My mom looked at the house, a hand to her mouth. "Oh, Arthur, look at this place. It's like something out of a postcard. I wonder who lives here." I smiled, my hands shaking slightly as I pulled a small, ribbon-tied box from my pocket. I handed it to her. "You do," I said softly. She looked at me, confused. Then she opened the box. Inside, nestled on a bed of cotton, was a single, shiny brass key. My dad moved closer, peering at the key, then at me. His brow was furrowed. "Zachary, what is this?" "It's yours," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Happy 50th anniversary. The house is yours. It's all paid for. No mortgage, no rent. Just peace." My mother's eyes filled with tears. She didn't say anything, just dropped the box and threw her arms around me, sobbing into my shoulder. My father stood frozen for a moment, his face a mask of disbelief. Then, I saw a tear trace a path through the wrinkles on his cheek. He put his hand on my back, his calloused palm warm and heavy. "Son," he whispered, and his voice broke. That was all he could manage. We spent the rest of the afternoon walking through the house. They touched everything. The smooth quartz countertops, the cool glass of the windows overlooking the ocean, the sturdy wood of the porch railing. We sat on the porch swing, watching the waves, and for the first time in my life, I saw my parents look truly, completely relaxed. The weight of decades seemed to lift from their shoulders. It was worth every penny, every late night, every sacrifice. I finally felt seen. I finally felt like I had done enough. In her excitement, my mom took pictures of everything with her phone. The kitchen, the view from the bedroom, the two of them smiling on the porch swing. "I have to send these to my sister," she said excitedly. "Carol won't believe it." My Aunt Carol, my mother's younger sister, a notorious gossip but harmless, I thought. I was too caught up in the joy of the moment to think anything of it. "Of course, Mom," I said, smiling. "Show everyone." That night, after I left them to spend their first weekend in their new home, my phone buzzed. It was a picture from my mom. A selfie of her and my dad on the porch, the sunset painting the sky orange and purple behind them. They looked 20 years younger. Underneath, the text read, "Thank you for our forever home, son. We love you." I saved the picture. My heart felt full. A few minutes later, another notification popped up. It wasn't for me. It was a social media alert. My Aunt Carol had posted one of my mom's photos, the one of the house from the outside. She tagged my mom, my dad, and my sister, Chloe. The caption read, "Can you believe the house Zachary bought for Arthur and Eleanor? Some kids get all the luck. Winky face. What a palace." A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. I told myself I was being paranoid. It was just an aunt being proud. But I couldn't shake the feeling of a storm cloud gathering on a perfectly clear day. That winking emoji felt less like a joke and more like a trigger. I just didn't know the gun had already been fired. The phone call came 2 days later. It was my mother, her voice bright and a little flustered. "Zachary, you'll never guess who's here. Chloe and Derek and the kids just showed up. They wanted to surprise us and see the new house. Isn't that sweet?" The knot in my stomach pulled tighter. "Wow, that's unexpected," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "When did they get there?" "Oh, just an hour ago. They're gonna stay for the weekend. Help us unpack the last of the boxes. It'll be so lovely to have the whole family here." The whole family. The phrase sounded ominous. A weekend, I told myself. It's just a weekend. They live 3 hours away. It's a long drive. It makes sense they'd stay over. I was being cynical. But the next day, another call. This time, her voice was less bright. "It's just, Chloe has so many good ideas for the place," she said hesitantly. "She thinks the guest room would be better as a playroom for the kids, and that the big bedroom with the ocean view should be theirs, since, they have the children and need more space." I gripped the phone. "Mom, that's your room. I specifically chose it for you and Dad because of the view." "I know, dear, I know. But Chloe says we can take the smaller bedroom. We don't need all that space. She's just trying to be practical." "And Derek is already talking about building a new deck out back. He says the one there is too small for entertaining." My jaw tightened. This wasn't helping. This was homesteading. They were staking a claim. "Mom," I said, my voice firm but calm, "it's your house. You and Dad decide where you sleep. You decide about the deck. Not Chloe. Not Derek." There was a pause. I heard her sigh, a long, weary sound. "You're right, I know. It's just easier not to argue. They get so upset." That was the core of it. My parents' entire lives had been structured around one single principle. Do whatever it takes to keep Chloe from getting upset. By the end of the week, the weekend visit had stretched into 5 days. The calls from my mom became more infrequent. When she did call, she sounded tired. I could hear the kids yelling in the background, the blare of a television. It didn't sound like a peaceful retirement home. It sounded like a daycare center. I tried calling my dad. He picked up, but his voice was terse. "Everything's fine, son." "Is it, Dad? Really?" Another sigh, this one deeper, filled with a resignation that scared me. "Derek's enthusiastic. He's moved the grill to the other side of the porch. Says it gets better sun there. Your mother doesn't like it, but, well, I knew." He was drawing a line in the sand, one small, insignificant piece of territory at a time. The grill, the bedroom, the deck. He was testing the boundaries, and he was finding out there weren't any. The final straw came on Friday, a full week after they had arrived. It was a text from my mom. "Chloe and Derek have decided to stay for the summer. They think it would be better for the kids to be near the beach. And Derek thinks he can manage the property for us." Manage the property. The words hit me like a physical blow. The fortress I had so carefully constructed was being taken over from the inside, and my parents were the ones holding the gates open. I knew then that a phone call wouldn't fix this. I couldn't ask them to fight a battle they'd already surrendered decades ago. I had to go back. I had to fight it for them. Before I could even respond to my mother's text, my phone buzzed again. It was a number I didn't recognize, from the same area code as the beach house. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Is this Zachary?" a woman's voice asked. It was hesitant, quiet. "Yes. Who is this?" "My name is Brenda. I live next door to your parents' new house. I don't want to cause any trouble, but I thought you should know something." I sat down. "Okay," I said slowly. "What is it?" I met your parents the day they moved in, she said, her voice warming slightly. They are the sweetest people. So excited. But the family that arrived a few days ago, they're very different. The man Derek, he's loud. She paused. I was on my patio this afternoon, and he was on his phone, right on the other side of the fence. He was talking about renting the house out on Airbnb. He was laughing about it. He said something like, yeah, we'll clear $6,000 a month easy in the summer. The old folks can have the back room. They won't even know what's happening. The air left my lungs. It wasn't just about taking over. It was about profiting from it. Using my gift, my parents' home, as a cash machine. The sheer audacity of it, the cold, calculating greed, it was breathtaking. Thank you, Brenda, I managed to say, my voice hoarse. Thank you for telling me. You did the right thing. I hope so, she said softly. Your parents seem so fragile. I was worried. We hung up. The phone felt like a block of ice in my hand. He wouldn't even have to worry about the mortgage. It was pure profit. A business venture built on the foundation of my love for my parents. The anger that had been simmering for years began to boil. And then, as if on cue, my phone rang again. This time it was my mother. I answered, my thumb shaking. Zachary? She whispered. Her voice was thin and broken. I could hear her crying. Oh, Zachary. Mom? What's wrong? What happened? It's Derek, she sobbed. Your father, he just asked Derek to please turn the music down. The baby was sleeping. And Derek, he got so angry. He stood up and he yelled at your father. He told him that if he didn't like the noise in his house, he could go sit in the car. I closed my eyes. A wave of red washed over my vision. He had threatened my father. He had made my mother cry. He had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Where's Dad now? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. He's just sitting on the porch, staring at the ocean. He won't talk to me. Oh, Zachary, what do I do? Chloe was in the background. I could hear her voice, not comforting her mother, but placating her husband. Derek, baby, calm down. He didn't mean it. You know how old people are. That was it. The last thread of patience, of family obligation, of playing the nice guy, snapped. They weren't just taking a house. They were systematically dismantling my parents' dignity, piece by piece, right in the sanctuary I had built to protect it. Mom, I said, and my voice was a stranger's. It was cold, hard, and clear. Listen to me. Don't do anything. Don't say anything. I'm coming. I'll be there in 5 hours. What are you going to do? She whispered, terrified of the answer. I'm going to end this, I said. Tonight. The moment I hung up the phone, the rage solidified into something else. Purpose. Cold, clear sense of mission. For years I had played defense. I had reacted to their crises, plugged their financial leaks, and absorbed their emotional fallout. That was over. It was time to go on offense. My mind, accustomed to designing complex software systems, began to architect a different kind of solution. One with firewalls and access protocols and zero tolerance for error. I wasn't just going to drive down there and yell. Yelling was their game. It was messy, emotional, and ultimately ineffective. My game was logic, preparation, and overwhelming force. Not physical force, but legal and strategic force. My first call was to Mr. Harrison, my lawyer. I caught him just as he was leaving his office. I explained the situation in clipped, precise sentences. The occupation, the Airbnb plan, the verbal abuse. Good heavens, he said, the professional calm in his voice a welcome anchor. He's planning to rent out a property owned by the trust? That's a flagrant violation of his status as a guest. He has no legal standing whatsoever. I know that, I said, but they don't. They think possession is everything. I'm on my way there now. What do I need? You have the trust documents I sent you? He asked. The binder is in my home office. Good, he said. That binder is your weapon and your shield. The deed, the trust agreement, specifically the clause that names you as sole trustee with absolute authority over the property's use and occupancy. Do not go in there and argue about who paid for what. Do not get into a shouting match. You present the facts. The law is unequivocally on your side. You are not asking them to leave. You are informing them of their legal obligation to vacate the property you manage. His words focused me. This wasn't a family squabble anymore. It was a legal proceeding. A landlord-tenant dispute where the tenants had no lease. My next call was to the number Brenda, the neighbor, had given me. It belonged to a Mrs. Gable, the president of the community's homeowners association. I explained who I was and what I had learned about the Airbnb listing. Her response was immediate and frosty. Absolutely not. Our covenants strictly forbid short-term rentals of less than 6 months. It's in the bylaws every owner receives. This is a residential community, not a hotel strip. If a property is listed, the owner of record is subject to a $5,000 fine for the first offense. The property is owned by a trust, I clarified. I am the trustee. Then you, sir, would be the one fined, she said crisply. I would suggest you handle it with extreme prejudice. I intend to, Mrs. Gable, I said. Thank you for the information. My final call was to a 24-hour locksmith in the town near the beach house. I explained that I was the trustee of a property and would require a complete rekeying of all exterior locks that evening. I scheduled an appointment for 9 p.m. The man on the phone, Victor, didn't ask any questions. He just said, "See you at 9. I threw a bag together, grabbed the heavy binder of trust documents from my office, and got in my car. The 5-hour drive stretched before me, a ribbon of asphalt leading to a confrontation I had spent my entire life avoiding. But there was no fear, no hesitation. The part of me that had always flinched from conflict was gone, burned away by the fury of a son whose parents had been threatened. As I merged onto the highway, the setting sun bleeding across the sky, my phone buzzed. It was Leo. I hadn't even told him what was happening. He must have had a sixth sense. You okay? The text read. You've been quiet. I typed back a short reply. Going to war, my friend. A moment later, he responded. Give him hell. And that's exactly what I planned to do. I arrived in the coastal town just after 8 p.m. The air was cool and heavy with the smell of salt and low tide. Streetlights cast long, lonely shadows on the quiet streets. Instead of driving straight to the Blue House, I pulled into the parking lot of a small, nondescript hotel a couple of miles away. Adrenaline was still pumping through my veins, but I knew walking in there angry and exhausted would be a mistake. I needed to be calm. I needed to be in control. I checked into a room that smelled of disinfectant and stale air. I dropped my bag on the floor and walked over to the small desk. I opened the heavy binder and laid everything out under the dim lamplight. The deed, the trust agreement, the notarized document naming me as sole trustee. I read through the key passages again. The legal jargon a comforting armor. Absolute authority. Sole discretion. Right of occupancy. These weren't suggestions. They were commandments written in the language of the law. Then, I took out my laptop. I went straight to the Airbnb website. Took me less than 5 minutes to find it. My beautiful blue house, my gift of peace, was listed as charming seaside getaway, steps from the ocean. The pictures were taken from Derek's phone. They were blurry and poorly lit. He'd even included a picture of the master bedroom, my parents' bedroom, with Chloe and him giving a thumbs up on the bed, my mother's wedding photo still on the nightstand. The violation felt profound, disgusting. He was selling my family's privacy for a few $100s a night. The listing was full of his typical bravado. Managed by a fun local family, the perfect spot for your summer party. There were already 2 bookings for the following week. I took meticulous screenshots of everything. The photos, the description, the calendar showing the bookings, the user profile he'd created. I saved them to a folder on my desktop and then printed them out using the hotel's business center. I added the printouts to my stack of documents. Evidence. Cold, hard, undeniable proof of his intentions. I looked at my phone. A missed call from my mom. A text. Are you almost here? I'm scared. I took a deep breath. The fear in her message only strengthened my resolve. I texted back. Just hit some traffic. Be there soon. Don't worry, Mom. I've got this. I sat there for a few more minutes in the silence of the cheap hotel room. I thought about the scared little boy I used to be, the one who would hide in his room when his parents argued about money. I thought about the young man who gave up his own dreams to patch the holes in his sister's. I thought about the man I had become, the one who had tried to solve a deep, emotional problem with a grand financial gesture. I had been wrong. The house wasn't the solution. It was just a place. The solution had to come from me. It had to be a line drawn not in the sand, but in solid rock. I gathered the papers, arranging them in a precise order. The deed on top, followed by the trust agreement, the HOA bylaws, and finally the damning Airbnb printouts. I slid them into a crisp manila folder. Felt heavy in my hands, heavy with the weight of what I had to do. I checked the time. 8:45 p.m. Victor the locksmith would be there in 15 minutes. It was time. I drove the last 2 miles slowly, the quiet suburban streets gliding past my windows. When I turned onto my parents' street, I cut the headlights and coasted to a stop about 100 yards away, parking in the deep shadow of an overgrown oak tree. From there, I had a clear view of the house. The porch light cast a warm, yellow glow, but the scene was anything but. The house looked like it was under siege. Derek's oversized pickup truck was parked crookedly in the driveway, taking up 2 spots. Toys were scattered across the lawn I had paid to have perfectly landscaped. Through the big picture window, the television was flickering, a chaotic blue light illuminating the living room. Then I saw him, my father. He was sitting on the porch swing, alone, silhouetted against the light from the window. He wasn't swinging. He was perfectly still, a statue of defeat, staring out at the dark, invisible ocean. My mother was nowhere to be seen, and in that moment all the strategic coldness, all the legal preparation, was overwhelmed by a simple primal wave of love and rage. That man on the swing had worked his fingers to the bone for 50 years. He had sacrificed everything for his family. He deserved to sit on that porch with a cup of coffee and the woman he loved, watching the sunrise in peace. He did not deserve to be a refugee in his own home. A car I didn't recognize pulled up in front of the house. A man got out carrying a toolbox. Victor the locksmith. He was early. He glanced at the house, then at his phone, then walked up the driveway and stood there, waiting. Punctual. Professional. Another piece of the plan falling into place. I checked my phone. I saw the text from my mom again. I'm scared. I thought about the conversation I'd had with Leo years ago. You're not her brother. You're her emergency fund. He was wrong about one thing. I was a brother, and I was a son. And I had finally realized that my primary duty wasn't to fund their lives, but to protect my parents, even if it meant protecting them from their own daughter. I picked up the manila folder from the passenger seat. The paper felt cool and decisive in my hand. I took one last look at my father on the porch, a silent promise passing between us across the dark lawn. I put the car in drive, pulled out from under the tree, and drove the final 100 yards. I didn't park behind Derek's truck. I pulled right up the driveway, stopping my car just behind my father's sedan, effectively boxing Derek's truck in. A small, strategic move. He wasn't going anywhere until I was finished. I got out of the car. The slam of the door echoed in the quiet street. My father's head snapped up. His eyes widened as he saw me. I gave him a short, sharp nod. I've got this. Then, I walked up the steps to the porch, past my trembling father, and straight toward the front door, behind which my sister and her husband were laughing at something on TV, oblivious. The reckoning had arrived. The moment my shoes hit the porch, the story loops back to the beginning. The scene I described before. My mother's muffled sobs from a dark corner of the porch, my father's frozen stance, and Derek's booming voice echoing in the salty air. This is my house. Get out. My sister Chloe's cruel, tinkling laugh. Oh, Dad, calm down. We're just getting settled in. Then silence. The chilling, absolute silence as they all saw me. I didn't say a word. I let the silence hang there, let it suffocate them. I held their gazes one by one. Derek, his face still flushed with anger, now laced with confusion. Chloe, her smirk melting into a mask of apprehension. My mother, her tearful eyes wide with a desperate hope. My father, his expression unreadable. I walked past Derek as if he were a piece of furniture and opened the front door. I turned back to the four of them on the porch. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the night air like a razor. Everyone, in the living room, now. It wasn't a request. Derek puffed out his chest, ready for a fight. Who the hell do you think you are, walking in here? Now, I repeated, my voice dropping lower, colder. I didn't look at him. I looked at Chloe. I knew he was just the muscle. She was the brain. She saw the look in my eyes, something she had never seen before, and a flicker of genuine fear crossed her face. She nudged Derek, a subtle, sharp motion. Let's just go inside, she muttered. They filed into the living room, a room I had so carefully chosen furniture for, now littered with their jackets, their kids' toys, and empty snack bags. I walked over and turned off the blaring TV. The sudden quiet was even more intense than before. I motioned for my parents to sit on the sofa. My mother did immediately, perching on the edge of the cushion. My father hesitated, then sat beside her, his back ramrod straight. Chloe and Derek stood awkwardly by the fireplace, a defiant, united front. So, Derek began, crossing his brawny arms. You came all the way down here. What do you want? If you're thinking of staying, the guest room is taken. The kids are in there. He was trying to reestablish dominance, to frame this as his territory. I ignored him completely. I placed the manila folder on the coffee table between us. The sound it made seemed to echo in the room. What's that? Chloe asked, her voice tight. More bills for you to pay for us? She was trying for sarcasm, but it came out weak, brittle. In a way, I said calmly. I pulled up a chair from the dining area, placing it directly opposite them. I sat down, creating a clear line of confrontation. Me versus them. My parents, the silent jury. I think there's been a misunderstanding about this house. I began, my voice even and measured. A rather significant one. Derek scoffed. No misunderstanding. You bought a house for the family. We're family. We're here. End of story. That's where you're wrong, I said, leaning forward slightly. This is not, in fact, a family house. And the story isn't ending. It's just beginning. I reached out and flipped open the folder. The first document was on top. The official county deed. I pushed it across the table toward them. See, when you buy a house, I said, my voice taking on the patient tone of a teacher explaining a simple concept to a difficult child. The person who owns it is listed right here. Why don't you read the name of the owner out loud for me? Derek? He snatched the paper, his eyes scanning it furiously. His face contorted in confusion. The Arthur and Eleanor Family Trust? What the hell is that? That, I said, leaning back in my chair, is the legal entity that owns this property. Not Mom, not Dad, and certainly not you. Chloe snatched the paper from him. Trust? What are you talking about? You gave them the house. I gave them the right to live in the house, I corrected gently. For the rest of their lives. Unburdened, unbothered. A right which is protected by the trust. But a trust needs a manager. A trustee. Someone who calls the shots. I reached into the folder again and pulled out the second document. The trust agreement. I flipped to the last page, the one with all the signatures and notary seals. I pointed to a single line. And that person, I said, my eyes locking with Chloe's, is me. The air in the room became thick, heavy. Chloe stared at the document, her mouth slightly agape. Derek just looked back and forth between the paper and my face, the cogs in his slow-moving brain grinding to a halt. Trustee. Chloe finally whispered, the word foreign on her tongue. Sole trustee, I clarified, with absolute authority regarding the management, use, and occupancy of this property. It's all in there. Section 4, Paragraph B. Feel free to read it. My lawyer, Mr. Harrison, is very thorough. The word lawyer hung in the air, a clear signal that this was no longer a family discussion. Derek finally found his voice. It was a low growl. You can't do this. This is our family's inheritance. You're trying to cheat us. An inheritance is something you get after someone dies, I said coldly. This was a gift for the living. A gift I chose to protect from people who might not understand its purpose. People, for instance, who might see it as a commercial rental property. And with that, I pulled out the third set of documents. The Airbnb printouts. I fanned them out on the coffee table like a winning poker hand. The blurry photo of them giving a thumbs up on my parents' bed. The glowing description of their fun local family management. The calendar with the confirmed bookings. My mother gasped. My father, who had been silent until now, surged to his feet. You were going to rent out our home? He demanded, his voice shaking with a fury I had never heard from him before. You were going to have strangers sleeping in our bed? Chloe's face went white. She looked at the printouts, then at me, then at her husband. She was trapped. There was no lie, no manipulation that could get her out of this. That was just an idea, Derek stammered, his bravado finally crumbling. We were going to manage it for them, for the family. All the money would go into a family account. A family account you control, I assume? I asked, raising an eyebrow. An account that happens to be in violation of Section 9 of the HOA covenants, which, as the property manager, I have right here. I slid the next paper across the table. It strictly forbids short-term rentals. The first offense fine is $5,000. A fine which, as trustee, I would be responsible for. A fine I have no intention of paying. The room was silent again, but this time it was the silence of a tomb. Chloe sank onto the arm of the sofa, her face in her hands. Derek just stood there, his big, muscular frame seeming to shrink before my eyes. Just then, the doorbell rang. Polite, formal chime. Everyone jumped. I'll get it, I said, standing up. I opened the door to find a sharp, severe-looking woman in her 60s with perfectly coiffed gray hair. It was Mrs. Gable, the HOA president. Behind her, a van had just pulled up to the curb. Victor, the locksmith. Everything was proceeding exactly on schedule. Good evening, Mrs. Gable said, her eyes sweeping past me to take in the chaotic scene in the living room. You must be Mr. Zachary. We spoke on the phone. We did, I said. Please, come in. She stepped inside, her presence immediately commanding the room. She looked at Derek. And you, I presume, are the proprietor of the charming Seaside getaway? Derek's face turned a mottled shade of red and white. He was utterly, completely defeated. I turned to my sister and her husband. My voice was calm, devoid of anger, devoid of everything but finality. You have 1 hour to pack your things and vacate my property, I said. If you are not gone by the time my locksmith is finished, I will have you removed for trespassing. Chloe looked up, her face streaked with tears of rage and humiliation. You can't do this to us, Zachary. We're family. No, Chloe, I said, looking at her, really looking at her, and seeing the selfish, manipulative person she had always been. You stopped being family the moment you made our mother cry and screamed at our father. Now you have 58 minutes. This was the moment everything changed. The moment I finally took back control not just of a house, but of my own life. Thank you for sticking with me this far. You guys are amazing. If you've ever felt like you were in a situation you couldn't get out of, help me out by liking this video and hitting that subscribe button. And drop a 1 in the comments below, so I know you made it to this turning point with me. It doesn't just help the channel. It lets me know that my story, my struggle, means something to someone out there. Your support is the biggest reason I can continue to share the rest of this journey. The hour that followed was one of the strangest of my life. There was no more yelling, no more arguing. The fight had gone out of them, replaced by a sullen, resentful silence. Chloe and Derek moved through the house like ghosts, mechanically stuffing clothes and toys into bags. The kids, woken up by the commotion, started crying, a miserable, confused sound that echoed in the tense quiet. I stood by the front door, arms crossed, an unmovable sentinel. I didn't help. I didn't gloat. I just watched. Mrs. Gable, bless her professional heart, stayed for a few minutes, long enough to personally watch Derek take down the Airbnb listing from his phone. She gave him a crisp lecture on community bylaws before departing with a firm, supportive nod in my direction. My parents sat on the sofa holding hands. They looked shell-shocked, caught between the pain of the confrontation and the dawning relief of freedom. Every so often, my mother would look at me with an expression of awe, as if she were seeing me for the first time. Victor the locksmith arrived right on time. He was a big, quiet man with gentle hands. He worked quickly and efficiently, starting with the front door. The whirring of his drill was the only sound, a punctuation mark on the end of an era. The sound of locks being changed, of security being restored. As Derek hauled the last of their bags out to his truck, Chloe stopped in front of me. Her eyes were red and puffy, but the look she gave me was pure venom. "I hope you're happy," she hissed, her voice low and shaky. "You've destroyed this family." "No, Chloe," I said, my voice just as quiet. "You and I both know this family was broken long before tonight. I'm just the one who finally stopped pretending it wasn't." She tried to say something else, a final, desperate plea or a curse, but the words wouldn't come. She just shook her head and walked out the door, pulling it shut behind her. I watched through the window as they loaded the kids into the truck. Derek couldn't get out of the driveway because my car was still blocking him. He laid on the horn, a long, angry blast. I didn't move. I waited until Victor was finished with the last lock. Victor handed me a set of 3 new, gleaming brass keys. "All set, sir," he said. "The house is secure." "Thank you, Victor," I said, pressing a generous tip into his hand. Only then did I walk outside, jangling the keys in my pocket. I got into my car, backed it slowly out of the driveway, and watched as Derek's truck peeled out, roaring down the quiet street and disappearing into the darkness. I stood for a moment in the driveway, breathing in the cool, salty air. It was over. The invasion was over. The house was quiet. It was theirs again. It was safe. When I walked back inside, the house felt different. Lighter. The oppressive cloud of tension had lifted. My mother was in the kitchen, making a pot of tea, her hands moving with a purpose I hadn't seen in days. My father was standing by the big window, looking out at the ocean. I walked over and stood beside him. For a long time, we just listened to the sound of the waves crashing on the shore. "I'm sorry you had to do that, son," he said finally, his voice rough. "I'm not," I said. "I'm sorry I didn't do it sooner." He turned to look at me, and in his eyes, I saw a deep, painful understanding. "I should have," he said, his gaze dropping to the floor. "When he yelled at me, a man shouldn't let another man talk to him like that in his own home. I froze. "It wasn't your fault, Dad," I said firmly. "This has been building for 30 years. You and Mom were just trying to keep the peace. But sometimes, peace looks a lot like surrender." My mother came in carrying a tray with 3 steaming mugs. She set it down on the coffee table, which was now blessedly clear of legal documents. She looked at me, her eyes still holding a universe of complicated emotions. "Will she ever forgive you, Zachary?" she asked softly. I sat down on the sofa and took a sip of tea. The warmth spread through my chest. "The real question, Mom," I said, looking from her to my father, "is whether you two can forgive yourselves for letting it get this far, and whether you're ready to make sure it never happens again." They were silent. I knew this was the hardest part. The confrontation was over, but the real change had to happen now, with them. "I love you both," I continued, my voice gentle but firm. "That's why I did all of this. But my money, my help, can't be the solution anymore. It's become part of the problem. It's enabled Chloe, and it's crippled you. From now on, the bank of Zachary is closed. Permanently. If she calls you for money, the answer has to be no. If she wants to visit for the summer, the answer has to be no. You have to be the parents. You have to draw the line. My mother started to cry again, but this time, the tears were different. They weren't tears of fear, but of grief for the boundaries she had never set. My father reached out and took her hand. He looked at me, his eyes clear and resolved. "The boy is right, Eleanor," he said softly. "He's not a boy anymore. He's a man. And he's right. It ends now. We will learn to say no." It was a quiet promise in a quiet house, but it felt more powerful than all the shouting and drama that had come before. It was the beginning of the real healing, not just for them but for me too. The next 6 months were a revelation. I drove down to the beach house every other weekend. At first, it was to make sure my parents were okay, that they were truly safe. But soon, it became something more. It became about connection. I saw a change in them I never thought possible. My father started a small garden in the backyard, planting tomatoes and herbs. He was out there every morning, humming to himself. My mother joined a local book club and started taking long walks on the beach with her new friends. They were laughing again. The haunted, weary look was gone from their eyes. They looked happy. They were living, not just surviving. Of course, the fallout with Chloe was immediate and ugly. Just as I predicted, she launched a smear campaign on social media. She wrote long, vague posts about toxic family members and the pain of being cut off for no reason. She painted me as a cold, cruel monster who had stolen her parents away and thrown her and her innocent children out onto the street. A few relatives called, confused. My Aunt Carol was chief among them. I handled each call the same way, calmly, factually, without emotion. I explained the Airbnb scheme, the verbal abuse, and the legal structure of the trust. By the end of each conversation, they were silent. The smear campaign fizzled out when it became clear I wasn't going to engage in the drama. Then came the phone calls. The first one from Chloe came about 2 months later. She was crying, of course. Derek's latest business venture had failed. They were behind on rent. They were facing eviction. "I don't know who else to turn to, Zach," she sobbed. "We just need $5,000 to get back on our feet. Just this once." The old me would have caved. The guilt, the sense of responsibility, it was a deeply ingrained instinct. But the new me remembered my mother's terrified sobs on the porch. "I'm sorry to hear you're in a tough spot, Chloe," I said, my voice steady. "I can't give you any money, but I can send you the number for a good credit counselor and a list of local social services that might be able to help." There was a stunned silence, followed by a torrent of abuse. I was selfish. I was heartless. I had abandoned my family. "I'm not abandoning you, Chloe," I said quietly. "I'm just refusing to enable you anymore. I hope you get the help you need." And then I hung up. It was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. But it also felt liberating. She tried my parents next, of course. She used the same sob story. My mother called me immediately after, her voice shaking. She called Zachary. She asked for money. "What did you say, Mom?" I asked, holding my breath. There was a pause. I said, "No, dear. We can't." Her voice was quiet, but it was firm. "And then your father took the phone and told her it was time she and Derek learned to stand on their own 2 feet. He told her we loved her, but the answer was no." I closed my eyes, a profound sense of pride and relief washing over me. They had done it. They had held the line. "It was hard," my mother admitted. "She said some terrible things to us. But after we hung up, your father and I just held each other. And we felt strong. Strong." It was a word I had never heard my mother use to describe herself. The fortress had worked. It hadn't just protected a piece of property. It had protected their souls. Life settled into a new, healthier rhythm. The drama subsided. The quiet was a relief. One afternoon, I was cleaning out some old files on my computer when I stumbled across a folder of backed-up text messages from years ago. Curious, I opened it. I found a thread between Chloe and our cousin, Nina. Nina was someone I'd always been close to, someone I trusted. As I scrolled through the messages, dated from around the time I first bought the house, my blood ran cold. It was a masterclass in manipulation, and Nina was the professor. "Nina, he bought them a what? A beach house? You're kidding me." Chloe, I'm so mad I could scream. All that money and what do we get? Nothing. Nina, you can't let him get away with that. You have to play this smart. Go down there. Be helpful. Insinuate yourself. Your mom is a total soft touch. If you cry, she'll give you anything. As for Zachary, his biggest weakness is guilt. Make him feel guilty for having so much while you have so little. It's his kryptonite. Message after message laid out the strategy. How to frame the takeover as helping. How to use the kids as leverage. How to play my parents against each other. Nina had provided Chloe with the entire playbook. This wasn't a spontaneous act of greed. It was a premeditated conspiracy. It was a betrayal so deep and calculated it took my breath away. It hurt more than anything Chloe or Derek had done. I closed the laptop, feeling sick. It was a painful reminder that the rot in our family was deeper than I had imagined. It solidified my resolve. The boundaries I had built weren't just walls. They were life rafts in a toxic sea. Just as I was sinking into that dark thought, my phone pinged with a new message. It was from a number I didn't recognize. Hi, Uncle Zachary. This is Lily. Lily, my niece, Chloe and Derek's oldest daughter. She was 16 now. I hadn't spoken to her since that awful night. My thumb hovered over the screen. I didn't know what to expect. More accusations? A plea for money on behalf of her parents? I typed back a simple, "Hey Lily." Her reply came instantly. "I just wanted to say thank you." I stared at the message, completely baffled. "Thank you for what?" "For what you did," she wrote. "For standing up to my dad. For saving that house for Grandma and Grandpa. They send me pictures sometimes. They look really happy." There was a long pause before the next message came through. "Things have been hard. Mom and Dad are fighting a lot. About money. About everything. But I'm getting a part-time job. I'm saving up. For a car. For my own college fund. I don't want to be like them." My eyes welled up. In the midst of all the wreckage, here was this single, stubborn sprout of hope. A 16-year-old girl who had seen the ugliness firsthand and had chosen a different path. She was breaking the cycle. "I'm very proud of you, Lily." I typed back, my fingers clumsy. "If you ever need anything, advice, help with homework, anything at all, you call me. Okay?" "Okay," she replied. "Love you." It was a simple message, but it was everything. It was a bridge across the chasm that had opened up in our family. It was a promise that the future didn't have to look like the past. A few weeks ago, I was sitting on the porch swing of the blue house. It was late afternoon, and the sun was beginning its slow descent, painting the sky in strokes of orange and gold. My dad was watering his tomato plants, a contented look on his face. My mother was sitting next to me, reading her book club's latest selection, a comfortable silence settling between us. The house was no longer just a property or a legal asset. It had become what I had always intended it to be. A home. A place of genuine peace. The locks on the doors weren't just for keeping people out. They were for creating a space where my parents could feel unconditionally safe, free from the emotional storms they had weathered for so long. I thought about the journey it had taken to get here. The anger, the betrayal, the painful confrontation. I thought about Chloe and Derek, struggling somewhere out there, trapped in the consequences of their own choices. I felt a pang of sadness for them, not for their situation, but for what they had lost, for the love they had squandered. I thought about Nina's treachery and Lily's brave text message. Family is a complicated thing. We think of it as an unconditional sanctuary, but sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who cause the most harm. I learned that love isn't about endless sacrifice. It's not about setting yourself on fire to keep others warm. True love, the kind that lasts, requires respect. And respect requires boundaries. I used to think my grand gesture, the house itself, was the ultimate expression of my love. But I was wrong. The ultimate expression of my love was the manila folder. It was the word no. It was the act of changing the locks. Because love isn't about covering for someone's bad behavior. Love is a house with good lighting and doors that lock. Boundaries aren't cruel. They are the quiet, steady acknowledgement that your own peace matters. They are how love keeps the porch light on without burning down the whole neighborhood. And sitting there, watching the sun dip below the horizon with the two people who gave me life, I finally felt at peace myself. The storm was over. We were home. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I know it was a long one, but your time and attention mean the world to me. I hope this story resonated with you in some way. Have you ever had to draw a tough line with someone you love? Can be one of the hardest things to do. I'd be honored if you'd share your own experiences or thoughts in the comments below. And if you haven't already, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing so you don't miss what comes next. Take care of yourselves.